and tonight we're going to make Fettuchini Abruzzesi, which is just basically means fettuccine from Abruzzo area of Italy. It's a recipe that my husband's family has been making for years. I'm going to go through the ingredients. So first we're going to use a tiny bit of olive oil, 1 pound of bacon that's been chopped, and I find it easier to freeze the bacon for about an hour before you're going to use it, and then just chop it just in the stack into small pieces. Then 1 medium onion, chopped, diced, 1 cup of broth or chicken stock, whichever you have on hand, a little bit of fresh ground pepper, 1 tablespoon of sweet dry basil, and a package of Laughing Cow cheese, which is actually comes in this package in little triangle foil wrapped packages, and you'll use all 8, so you just want to unwrap them. I have them unwrapped here. And then a cup of Pecorino Romano grated. If you want something a little bit less sharp, you can use a Parmesan. And then a pound or 2 pounds of pasta is what you typically want. I only have 1 pound, so I'm gonna save half of the sauce for later. And typically we use fettuccine, but tonight I'm using a pappardelle, which is just a wide flat noodle. Okay, so we're gonna start off with a fairly large skillet. And I've put a tiny bit of olive oil in here. I would say a couple teaspoons, or just a little swirl, less than a tablespoon. The original recipe calls for a couple tablespoons of oil, but it's a very rich dish as it is, and you're cooking a whole pound of bacon, so you really don't need it. I'm just gonna start the chopped onion, just starting to sweat, and I'm gonna throw in all of the chopped bacon. And we want to make sure that you get that bacon separated fairly early so it doesn't start sticking together. We're just going to cook it down, not to the point where it's brown, but just to where it's kind of just on the raw side of cooked. Alright, so it's been a couple of minutes. The bacon is getting close to being ready for the next step. While we're doing this, I've actually brought a pot of water up to a boil with a good amount of salt in it. I always like to make sure that I'm flavoring my pasta while I'm boiling it, and that's going to be for the pasta. So we're almost here on the bacon. In fact, I think we are. So you can see it's not crispy bacon, it's just cooked through. Basically the fat has solidified, and it's rendered off a good amount of fat into the pan for the rest of our cooking process. So our next step is going to be our cup of chicken broth, chicken stock. I talk about this a lot. I really like the idea of using stock whenever I can, and so that's some homemade stock that I had. But broth would work just perfectly fine, or store-bought stock if you could find it. So we added that in, and then we're going to add the 1 tablespoon of sweet basil, dried basil. I don't use a ton of dried herbs. I tend to use more fresh herbs. But I have tried to modify this recipe with fresh basil before, and it just isn't the same. So it really does need the dried basil to get kind of in there, and it, as you can see, it kind of speckles the whole dish. So we put that in, and then just a little bit of fresh ground pepper, just to taste. You don't need any salt at all in this recipe. Between the bacon and the cheese that we're going to add at the end, it's plenty salty. So at this point, we're just going to let this cook down. We're medium-high heat, and we're going to basically let it reduce by half, so there should be half as much liquid as there is now by the time we go to the next step. And it's going to kind of start to thicken up, and then the next ingredient, the cheese, will continue to thicken the process. So just a few more minutes there with that. And I'm going to put our pasta in now. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes, and the liquid has reduced, and it started to thicken up. You're not looking for necessarily a thick sauce at this point. It's going to get thicker in the next step, but it's definitely thicker than it was when we first put the stock in. At this point, we're just going to throw in our very authentic Italian Laughing Cow cheese, the original Swiss flavor, and we're just going to kind of chop it up. with our spatula, smush it around. And this is just going to basically cook down. We're going to let it melt, and as it melts, we'll keep stirring it in. In the meantime, I believe our pasta is ready. Unfortunately, I have tile backsplash, rough tile, because in the old days when I was cooking with my mom, we would just throw it on the wall to make sure it was done. But now with this, it doesn't really work so well. So, looks done. We'll just leave that in the strainer for a few minutes until we're ready with our sauce. Keep mushing it around. And as we start to see the hunks of cheese incorporate and kind of stop being in little balls, that's when we're getting close to being finished. It's pretty quick. All right. Just gonna leave it here for maybe a minute to just fully thicken. And in the meantime, I'm gonna grab my pasta. And like I said before, this recipe will work for about 2 pounds of pasta. So I have a pound, so we're just gonna use about half of the sauce, and then we can use it to put on some other type of pasta, maybe tomorrow or the next day. Just gonna pour this over here, our bowl of pasta, about half of the sauce in here. We're gonna toss this all together. To finish, let's stop here. To finish the recipe, we typically put a whole cup of pecorino romano in, and but because again we only use half the sauce, I'm only going to use about half of this. All right. So we're going to toss it all together, the cheese, and that's pretty much it. So here I have the fettuccine, or in this case pappardelle, plated, and I try to keep it fairly light because it is a really rich dish. So we have a spinach salad and some roasted vegetables, a little bit of Italian bread, just warmed, and so this is it.